And many of these schools place emphasis on developing inner capacities for sensation, that there are senses beyond the five physical senses that can be developed in our inner experience. And, since we mentioned the Buddhists, the Tibetan Buddhists in particular, emphasize that sensation doesn't take place in the body, it takes place in consciousness. So it's a property of consciousness that's being facilitated through the body. So I think you're right, Paul, that there actually could be sensation or some form of perception after death that may be even more refined without the body muffling it. So the body can both be a muffler for sensation, but also an amplifier.
A vehicle, definitely.
A vehicle for sensation and unfoldment too.
Yeah, on this level, at this portion of the electromagnetic spectrum, I think that's true.
I'm just trying to.
Go ahead, Kim.
Well, I was just. I was just trying to imagine what it would be like, sensing into what it would be like to see, to have the sensory capacity of sight without having eyes. I'm not talking about being blind either, but just the capacity for sight without having the hardware, I guess.
Well, and yet people can do that. They can see auras. They can, they can receive information visually without using their visual apparatus.
But they are. I mean, when you're seeing auras, not everybody can see it, but when you're looking at an aura, you're using your eyes.
Yeah. Well, but I think about the example from the French resistance fighter Jacques Le Saurien, who had the book, And There Was Light, where he was blind, and yet he could see and perceive people in his environment around him.
Right, so he was able to actually see without sight.
Right, which indicates to me that it's the mind or is the consciousness that sees. Maybe with the aid of the eyes at times, but not exclusively so.
So I can't remember, I did read that book, but was he able to accurately pick up in the environment what was happening versus having mental images in his head?
Yeah, he could walk down the street and avoid obstacles. Okay. He could also evaluate people. He could sort of see into their nature and evaluate whether they would be loyal or not for the French resistance. So he had a very strong intuition, and we could even say that intuition is a form of perception that doesn't rely on the body itself. It operates, beyond the physical body.
Well, Kim, I think you're raising good questions both this week and last week when you asked these questions about how ultimately what we're calling an energy system, what I've called an energy system, can actually have these capacities, as you're saying, to see without having a physical counterpart. How can you see without an eye to see through? Mm-hmm. How can you have a soul that's or memory which is product merely of energy without having brain cells to store the memories in? And that's a very interesting abstract theoretical question to which I have no reasonable answers, but it is something that we have to ask. I think you're right to ask. It's a fundamental question about if there is life after death, what kind of capacities do we need to have to negotiate it? What kind of sensory and what kind of capacities are there? And it suggests to me, the as above, so below dictum, which is that if you assume that this is the low level we're on, and that there are such things as sensory capacities, that not only would those sensory capacities be existent on the higher level, but as above, so below, they would be the matrix from which the capacities at the lower level grew out of, and so they would be vastly superior, vastly more powerful after death than before death, you might argue. Just one final thing on this. I know that there have been times when in my dreams, I've I've created whole sympathies, whole symphonies that come out of my mouth as I'm singing, and I'm singing about 100 instruments all at the same time.
Mm.
And it's not because I'm such a great musician, but because I think I had been reading or something about how the truly great musicians, there's a way to have music in the afterlife that is vastly more sophisticated and more powerful than earthly music, and that forms the prototype for that earthly music. So you could say that, to be optimistic, cautiously optimistic, you could say that all our capacities, as E.J. Gold said, are 9 times more powerful in the afterlife than in this world. And that's a good thing and perhaps a bad thing if you're suffering, of course. If you're in hell, it's not very good, but otherwise it's a pretty good thing.
Yeah, it's very interesting that our capacities, in terms of their physical expression, may be derived from extraordinary sources. They may be reflections of our true capacities. And I think your dream is a good example where you were hearing the symphony. And you think about great composers, how they hear a symphony in their minds and their imagination, and then they work to sort of manifest that physically. But they're not physically hearing it; they're hearing it in their experience, in their mind, consciousness, imagination, however you want to put it.
Right. So when the universe was creating life billions of years ago, there were certain parameters of perception and experience and knowledge and so on that probably existed inherently in the universe that are the outcome of the fundamental nature of being.
Yeah.
That life adopted. So in that sense, to come back to our original question, you might say that we only think of life and crave life out of illusion because what's waiting for us after death is potentially something vastly more in line with our true nature, more home-like, more real, more extraordinary in every way. And that's what some people say when you talk about their near-death experiences. They say they went to a beautiful place and they never wanted to come back.
Mm-hmm.
And if they do come back, it's usually because they have children.
Yeah.
They have to take care of.
And yet when they come back changed, and they seem to inherently value the preciousness of the life that they have. So they see life in a different way. So I wouldn't necessarily frame it as the afterlife being superior, because I think that's a misperception of the nature of what we're involved with now. I would say it's simply different. That there are capacities that we can have through this physical existence that we won't have in the afterlife. It doesn't make them better or worse, but it's simply a different dimension of experience.
Well, and I'd say that without the filter of the mind, that in that sense, it would be, and I'll use the term, I think it would be better.
You think it would be what, Kim?
I think it would be better without the filter of the mind, in the sense of having that direct experience, whatever it is.
Yeah. And yet I would say there's a perspective by which the mind, occluding our experience, is also something precious. That mind has that capacity to actually block itself, or to block the expression of life force, is really quite remarkable. So I would say I wouldn't separate anything into good or bad. I'd just say different.
Well, yeah, and now that I'm thinking about it, is the mind really does get a bad rap.
Very bad rap. It's a good mind.
It is a good mind.
Yeah.
It's like, will it be used for good or evil?
Yeah. Rocks can't do this.
We don't know what's rock consciousness, do we?
No, it's probably a lot simpler.
I mean, you can say that life's virtue consists of precisely the muck that gets in the way of living clearly and cleanly and with true dignity and compassion for most of us. Because with all the things being on this level so confused, so through a glass darkly, things come at us much more slowly and give us the opportunity to deal with them in a way we couldn't deal with them, where there are no barriers. And also potentially, one of the constant speculations about the afterlife is that at least if you're not in hell, there's a surcease of pain. And I think we are all living in some level of pain in this life all the time, unconsciously.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when that goes away, or when people think that's going to go away, there's a tremendous relief and a sense of blessedness and grace. At last, your pain is being taken care of, being addressed,
Yeah.
and you don't have to suffer anymore.
That's the
Whether
kind of perception.
That's the perception. Yeah, whether it's actually true or not, I don't know.
We don't know.
It's certainly not true for people who end up in hell, and there are many people who have near-death experiences, who have hellish experiences,
Yeah.
which they don't usually talk about. But for many of us, for many people, at least you could say that in theory there's a prospect of the end of pain, at least for a while, the end of suffering,
Mm-hmm.
a sense of going home, a sense of being fulfilled, a sense of being whole.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that may be paradoxically what we value life for, is the suffering. Because the suffering it encourages us, motivates us, and allows us to change and to grow and to develop. Whereas when we're just feeling good, where's the motivation in that?
Right.
Well, to feel better. But I wanted to address a point that you had mentioned a little bit earlier. We're talking about the mind and having things come more slowly. So it reminds me of the story of the Bhagavad Gita and Arjuna and Krishna getting ready on the battlefield. And Krishna shows Arjuna reality without any filters, shows him the whole of reality. And it was too much to take. So he could only do it for a very brief time. So if we think in terms of, the vastness of reality that is beyond our perceptual capacities, and is that something that then comes with the changing of the guard, if you will, from one level of existence to another level of existence, moving from life to death. And I think we're going to stop right there. I'm just going to, since we're at about 13 minutes, so hold that thought.